The air at Forward Operating Base Ares was a tangible thing. A gritty blanket of heat and pulverized sand that clung to the skin and worked its way into every mechanism. Master Sergeant Anya Sharma felt it in her throat as she stepped off the Osprey. The rotor wash a final, violent goodbye from the world of air-conditioned order. Here, order was a suggestion, enforced by HESCO barriers and the unwavering glare of the sun. She was 42, her face a roadmap of deployments she never spoke of, and her uniform was a shade too clean, a cardinal sin in a place where sweat and dust were the dominant currency. 3 men lounged in the sliver of shade offered by a stacked shipping container, their combat shirts sweat-darkened at the chest and collar. They were the base's elite, a sniper team. Their leader, a Sergeant K. Jensen whose jaw seemed permanently set in a smirk, watched her approach. His call sign, Ares, was stenciled on his helmet, a testament to his self-regard. His companions, Corporal Diaz and Specialist Bell, mirrored his posture of casual disdain. "Must be lost," Diaz muttered, just loud enough to carry on the dry wind. "Supply depots that way, ma'am." Sharma didn't break stride. Her eyes, the color of faded slate, swept over them once, cataloging the custom slings, the aftermarket optics, the general air of peacocks in a world of sparrows. She carried a standard M110A1 rifle case, its polymer shell unadorned with the stickers and slogans favored by the younger generation. It was government property, and she treated it as such. "Looking for Colonel Rostova's command post," she said, her voice even, without inflection. Jensen pushed himself off the container. He was tall, built like a predator, and moved with an athlete's lazy grace. "You're the replacement? For Gunny Martinez." He didn't try to hide his incredulity. Gunny Martinez had been a legend, a man who'd been medevaced after stepping on an IED, taking the injury with a string of curses that were now part of base lore. "I'm Master Sergeant Sharma," she replied, offering nothing more. "Sharma," Jensen repeated, tasting the name and finding it bland. "Heard you were coming from a desk at CENTCOM. Pushing paper, right? Bet the air conditioning was nice." Bell snickered. "Careful with that rifle, Master Sergeant. Sun's hot. Might warp the plastic." Sharma's gaze settled on Bell. It wasn't a glare. It was heavier than that. A deep, pressure-filled stillness that made the young specialist's smile falter. She said nothing. The silence stretched, made louder by the distant hum of a generator. She held his eyes until he looked away, suddenly fascinated by a loose thread on his glove. She turned back to Jensen. "Colonel Rostova's post?" she repeated, the question now a quiet command. Jensen's smirk tightened. He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. "Big tent with the antennas. She's expecting you. Try not to get heatstroke on the way." He and his team watched her walk away, her posture ramrod straight, her steps measured and economical. "Desk jockey," Diaz scoffed the moment she was out of earshot. "They're sending us a damn secretary to fill Gunny's boots. Rostova's gonna eat her alive." Jensen watched her disappear into the command tent. He wasn't so sure. There was something in her silence that was more unsettling than any boast. It was a void. He just couldn't tell if it was empty or if it was hiding something deep and cold. He decided, with the easy confidence of a man who had never been truly tested, that it was empty. An old soldier sent to finish her time in the sun. She wouldn't last a week. Inside the tent, the air was cooler but thick with the smell of ozone and stale coffee. Maps covered every vertical surface, marked with red lines that delineated the harsh realities of their operational area. Colonel Eva Rostova stood before a digital overlay, her expression as unforgiving as the landscape outside. She was a commander forged in the crucible of low-intensity conflicts that had a nasty habit of becoming high-intensity without warning. She turned as Sharma entered, her eyes giving no quarter. "Master Sergeant Sharma," Rostova said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an assessment. "Your file precedes you. Impressive commendations. From a decade ago. The last 5 years have been spent in Tampa, analyzing signals intelligence." "Yes, Colonel," Sharma said, standing at a perfect parade rest. "This is not Tampa. Master Sergeant Rostova gestured to the map. Out there is the Al-Hajr corridor. It's a viper's nest. I lost one of my best snipers 2 weeks ago because a spotter missed a heat signature from a concealed tunnel entrance. I need a trigger puller, not an analyst. I need someone who can spend 72 hours looking through a scope without moving, live on water and protein paste, and make a 2,000-meter shot in a crosswind that could strip paint from a Humvee. She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the space between them. Your file says you're qualified, but it's old paper. Out here, the only thing that matters is current performance. Sergeant Jensen's team holds the Overwatch position for Operation Serpent's Eye next week. It's a critical piece of a much larger puzzle. I was expecting a seasoned operator from the 75th to replace Martinez. Instead, I get you, the dismissal was clinical, brutal. Are you sure you're in the right place? I was sent where the orders directed me, Colonel, Sharma replied, her voice unwavering. Orders can be rescinded. Rostova shot back. Tomorrow at 0800 is the quarterly qualification for all designated marksmen on this FOB. It is not optional. The course of fire is 52 targets. Mixed range, varied exposure, stress-induced. The standing record, set by Sergeant Jensen last month, is 51 hits with 1 weapon malfunction he cleared in 4 seconds. Rostova stepped closer, her gaze sharp enough to cut. You will shoot that course. You will use a standard-issue rifle from the armory, not a custom piece you've grown accustomed to. If your score is not perfect or near to it, you will be on the next Osprey back to CENTCOM, where you can analyze the data from a safe distance. I will not risk a critical mission on a soldier who hasn't smelled cordite in 5 years. Is that understood? Perfectly, Colonel, Sharma said. There was no defiance in her tone, only a quiet acceptance of the terms. Good. See the armorer, draw your weapon and ammunition. Be on the range at 0730 for prep. Rostova turned back to her map, the conversation over. As Sharma exited the tent, the oppressive heat hit her again. Jensen and his team were still there, now ostensibly cleaning their rifles. They had heard every word, the tense canvas flaps doing little to muffle the colonel's sharp voice. Jensen looked up, a triumphant gleam in his eye. Here you're dancing for your supper tomorrow, Master Sergeant, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. The range here, it's tricky. The mirage gets bad after 0900. And the wind, she's a fickle beast. I'll keep that in mind, Sharma said, walking past them toward the armory. Hey, Jensen called out. She stopped but didn't turn. The armory chief is a stickler. Make sure you get a good magazine. Some of the old ones have issues, weak springs, bent feed lips. You get a double feed out there, it'll kill your time. Rostova counts that against you. Sharma finally turned to look at him. Thank you for the advice, Sergeant. He grinned, a flash of white in his sun-darkened face. Just trying to be helpful. Wouldn't want you to embarrass yourself. That night, Sharma didn't go to the MWR tent or the chow hall. She drew her M110A1 rifle, a standard Harris bipod, and a Leupold optic, the same kit issued to a dozen other soldiers on the base. She also drew 10 20-round magazines. In the stark, lonely light of the armory's maintenance bay, she broke the weapon down. Her hands moved with an intimacy that belied 5 years behind a keyboard. Every pin, every spring, every surface was checked, wiped down, and lubricated with a single, precise drop of oil. She knew the rifle. It was an old friend, a demanding and unforgiving one. She then inspected the magazines. She disassembled each one, checking the springs for tension, the followers for cracks, the feed lips for any sign of damage. She found one with a slightly worn follower and set it aside. The other 9 were perfect. She loaded them methodically, each round pressed in with a firm, practiced thumb. Thump, click, thump, click. The rhythm was a meditation. Across the base, Sergeant Jensen was having a quiet word with a disgruntled armory clerk, a specialist who owed him a favor. A crisp $50 bill was exchanged for one of the magazines Sharma had drawn and returned. Jensen took it to a dark corner behind the vehicle depot. Using the edge of a multi-tool, he carefully, almost imperceptibly, bent the left feed lip inward by less than a millimeter. Then, with a fine file, he scored a tiny burr onto the front of the polymer follower. It was subtle work. It wouldn't cause a jam on the first round, or even the second. But after the heat and pressure of a few shots, that burr would catch the brass casing of the next round, trying to push it forward while the bent lip held it back. It would create a classic textbook Type 3 malfunction. A double feed. A messy, time-consuming jam that required stripping the magazine and cycling the bolt multiple times. For a shooter on a clock, it was a death sentence. He then had the clerk swap the sabotaged magazine with one from Sharma's ready pile, while she was briefly called away to sign a hand receipt. When she returned, her 10 magazines were waiting. 9 perfect, 1 poised to fail. Jensen walked back to his quarters, whistling softly. He wasn't just going to watch the desk jockey fail. He was going to give her a little push. The sun rose the next morning with hostile intent, bleaching the sky to a pale, hazy white. The range was a long, dusty scar carved into the desert floor. Steel targets, painted a flat tan, were scattered at ranges from 300 to 1,500 meters. Some were static silhouettes, others were reactive, falling only with a solid hit. A few were on automated movers, appearing for just seconds at a time. Colonel Rostova stood at the firing line, arms crossed, a stopwatch in her hand. The entire sniper platoon, along with a few curious off-duty soldiers, had gathered to watch. The air was thick with anticipation and schadenfreude. Jensen shot first. He moved with a theatrical flair, his movements large and confident. He slammed his custom-built rifle onto the mat, locked his magazine in with a loud crack, and began the course. His shooting was excellent. The ringing of steel echoed across the range, a steady, lethal percussion. He flowed from prone to kneeling to standing positions against a barricade, his transitions smooth. He hit target after target, the impacts sending up puffs of dust. On the 48th target, a moving silhouette at 1,100 meters, he missed. A collective sigh went through the crowd. He cursed, quickly acquired the target again, and hit it on his follow-up. He finished the course with 51 out of 52 hits, his time a blistering 4 minutes and 12 seconds. He walked off the line to a round of applause and backslapping from his team. He shot a smug look at Sharma, who was waiting impassive. "Beat that paper pusher," he muttered as he passed her. Then it was her turn. Master Sergeant Anya Sharma walked to the firing line. She moved without wasted motion. She laid her mat down, placed her rifle on its bipod, and arranged her magazines in a neat row beside her. She didn't look at the crowd or at Colonel Rostova. Her world had shrunk to the rifle, the scope, and the shimmering heat haze rising from the desert floor downrange. "Shooter, are you ready?" Rostova's voice was like stone. Sharma took a deep breath, let half of it out, and settled behind the scope. "Ready," she said, her voice calm. "Stand by." The world went silent. There was only the slight tremor of the wind and the pounding of her own heart, a slow, steady drumbeat. "Engage!" Her first magazine was the sabotaged one. She didn't know it. It was simply the one on the far left of her row. She chambered around, the bolt sliding home with a smooth, greasy click. Her first target was a static silhouette at 400 meters. Crosshairs settled on the center of mass. Breathe in, breathe out halfway. A gentle squeeze. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, a familiar, comforting punch. A fraction of a second later, the satisfying ping of lead on steel echoed back. Hit. She worked the bolt. Another round chambered. Second target, 550 meters. Ping. Hit. Third, a reactive swinger at 600 meters. Ping. Hit. The rifle was functioning perfectly. The burr on the follower was sliding harmlessly past the smooth brass casings. Jensen watched, his smirk fading into a frown. Maybe the jam wouldn't happen. Fourth shot, fifth, sixth. Her movements were a study in efficiency. There was no flare, no wasted energy. Bolt, acquire, breathe, squeeze, repeat. It was a machine-like cadence. The crowd grew quiet. The backslapping stopped. They were watching something different. Not a performance, but a process. On the 7th round, it happened. She fired, hitting a target at 800 meters. She worked the bolt, but it stopped halfway, grinding to a halt. It was stuck. Click. The sound was small, but in the sudden silence, it was as loud as a cannon shot. A Type 3 malfunction. A double feed. The sabotaged follower had caught the shoulder of the next round, trying to force it into a chamber that was already occupied by a spent, unextracted casing. It was a catastrophic jam. Jensen's smirk returned, wider than ever. This was it. This was the failure he'd engineered. He glanced at Rostova, expecting to see disgust. Instead, he saw her eyes narrow, her focus intensifying on Sharma. Diaz and Bell exchanged a triumphant look. The show was over. Clearing a jam like that would take her at least 10, maybe 15 seconds. She'd have to break position, drop the magazine, work the charging handle, probably mortaring the rifle to clear the stuck casing. Her time would be ruined. Her concentration shattered. Sharma did not curse. She did not sigh. Her expression did not change. For a single, frozen second, she remained perfectly still. Then her hands moved. They weren't fast, not in a panicked way. They were impossibly precise. Her right thumb hit the magazine release. The magazine didn't drop. The pressure of the jammed rounds held it in place. Her left hand came up and ripped the magazine out with controlled violence. She didn't look at it. She just dropped it onto the mat beside her, discarding the problem. Her right hand moved to the charging handle, pulling it back while her left hand tilted the rifle to the right, opening the ejection port to the sky. The two jammed rounds, one spent, one live, were wedged together. Gravity alone wouldn't clear it. Without breaking her cheek weld from the stock, she kept the bolt held to the rear with her right hand. Her left hand, fingers nimble and strong, reached into the ejection port. A surgeon's dexterity in a tactical glove. She hooked a finger around the live round and plucked it free, tossing it aside. She then hooked the rim of the spent casing and flicked it out. The chamber was clear. Total time elapsed, 28 seconds. Jensen's jaw went slack. No one cleared a double feed that fast. No one. It was a fluid, single, unbroken motion, a piece of muscle memory from 1,000 unseen hours of practice. Before the discarded casings had even settled in the dust, her left hand was already moving. It slapped a fresh magazine from her row into the well. The click was sharp, definitive. Her right palm slammed the bolt release. The bolt carrier group flew forward, stripping a new round and seating it with a solid, authoritative clack. Her eye was already back in the scope. She had never truly left it. She acquired the next target, a 900-meter silhouette. The entire sequence, from the initial jam to the rifle being ready to fire again, had taken 41 seconds. 1/10 of a second slower than Jensen's clean, simple malfunction clear. Breathe in, breathe out, squeeze, pang. The sound of the hit was sharp, defiant, perfect center shot. The crowd was utterly silent now. The mockery had evaporated, replaced by a stunned, disbelieving awe. Sharma didn't pause. She began to shoot again, her rhythm reestablished, but faster now. More intense. It was as if the malfunction had angered something deep inside her. A cold, professional fury that was now being vented through the rifle. Pang, pang, pang. The targets fell one after another. 950 meters. 1,000. 1,150. She transitioned to the kneeling position, her body a solid, stable tripod. More hits. The moving target at 1,100 meters that Jensen had missed on his first try appeared. She tracked it for half a second, led it by a hair and squeezed the trigger. The steel plate, shaped like a running man, flipped backward with a loud clang. A direct hit. She moved to the barricade, using its different ports for support. Her movements were economical, her stability absolute. The rifle seemed less a tool and more an extension of her own body. The barrel grew hot, the heat haze from it starting to distort the air, but her shots didn't wander. She compensated for it instinctively. The final 10 targets were the most difficult, ranging from 1,200 to 1,500 meters. The wind, which had been a nuisance, was now a significant factor, gusting unpredictably across the open plain. She paused for a moment, her eye not in the scope but on the world, watching the dance of dust devils in the distance, feeling the pressure on her cheek. She wasn't just seeing the wind, she was reading its language. She held off to the left, the crosshairs aimed at empty air. She fired. 2 seconds later, a faint ping returned. 1,200 meters. Hit. She adjusted, fired again. Ping. 1,250. Hit. She worked her way out, shot by shot, a masterclass in ballistics and wind calling. The final target was a 24-inch circle at 1,500 meters, nearly a mile away. It was the make-or-break shot, the one that separated the experts from the legends. She took 2 deep breaths. She settled the crosshairs, holding high and left, a complex calculation of drop and drift made in an instant. The world seemed to hold its breath with her. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle roared one last time. The wait was agonizing. 1 second. 2. 3. A tiny, almost inaudible tink echoed back across the range, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the desert. But it was there. Hit. 52 targets. 52 hits. One catastrophic, deliberately induced malfunction cleared in a time that was considered nearly impossible. She had not just passed the test. She had rewritten it. Anya Sharma worked the bolt one last time, ensuring the chamber was empty. She engaged the safety, removed the magazine, and laid the rifle gently on the mat. She stood up, her face impassive, and turned to face the silent crowd. Colonel Rostova stood frozen for a moment, the stopwatch forgotten in her hand. She walked over to Sharma's firing position. She didn't look at the master sergeant. She looked down at the discarded, sabotaged magazine. She picked it up. Her thumb traced the subtly bent feed lip. Her eyes saw the tiny, gleaming burr on the follower. She knew. She knew exactly what it was and what it meant. Sabotage. She looked up, her gaze locking with Jensen's across the range. His face was pale, his arrogance stripped away, leaving only a raw, sickly fear. Rostova's expression was murderous. She held the magazine up for him to see, a silent accusation. Then she dropped it in the dust. She turned to Sharma. Her voice, when she spoke, was low, stripped of its earlier hostility. Master Sergeant, I have never seen a malfunction like that cleared with such speed, nor have I ever seen this course shot perfectly. Not once. She paused, her eyes searching Sharma's. That was not a technique you learn at a qualification range. That is a scar. Learned somewhere hard and ugly. Where did you learn to do that? Sharma met her gaze. Chark Valley, Logar Province. Colonel. The enemy was inside the wire, she offered no more. She didn't need to. An old master gunnery sergeant, the FOB's chief armorer who had been watching from the side, stepped forward. He was a man who had seen 3 decades of war, and his face was a leather mask. He had been staring at Sharma not with surprise, but with a dawning, incredulous recognition. He stopped a few feet from her. I saw that sequence once before, he said, his voice raspy with disuse and dust. From a spotter's scope, a single shooter holding a collapsed flank against a dozen insurgents. We thought she was down when her rifle went silent. Then she was firing again. It was inhuman. He looked at Sharma, his eyes filled with a reverence that bordered on fear. We never knew her name. We just had her call sign. The one they whispered about in the ARs for years after. He took a half-step forward and spoke the name like an incantation. Kestrel. The name fell into the silence, and everything changed. The whispers started among the older NCOs in the crowd. Kestrel. A ghost story, a legend from the early, brutal days of the war. A sniper who operated alone or with a single spotter, credited with a number of kills so high they were classified as unbelievable. A figure who would appear on a threatened flank, turn the tide, and vanish before the sun came up. No one knew who she was. Her file was a ghost redacted into oblivion. Colonel Rostova's eyes widened. She had read those files. She had seen the blacked-out lines and the impossible mission reports. She was looking at a living piece of military mythology. The desk jockey, the paper pusher from CENTCOM, it had all been a cover. She looked from Sharma to the pale, trembling Sergeant Jensen. The pieces clicked into place. The casual mockery, the advice about the magazines, the impossible jam. It was a setup born from arrogance and insecurity. Rostova's voice was ice. Sergeant Jensen, Corporals Diaz and Bell. My office. Now she didn't shout. She didn't have to. The quiet deadliness in her tone was more terrifying than any rage. The three men flinched as if struck, their faces ashen. They turned and walked toward the command tent, their careers ending with every step. Rostova turned back to Sharma. The entire power dynamic had been inverted. She was no longer a colonel addressing a subordinate she suspected of being washed up. She was a commander standing before a weapon she had just discovered was far more potent than she could have imagined. Master Sergeant, Rostova began, then corrected herself, the name feeling inadequate. She looked at the M110A1 on the mat. Is that rifle adequate for your needs? It's a good rifle, Colonel, Sharma said. Take any weapon you want from the armory. Anything. Jensen's custom kit is now available. Operation Serpent's Eye is a go in 48 hours. You will not be part of a team. You will have your own Overwatch position. You pick the location. You will have final say on engagement criteria. You answer only to me. It was the highest level of trust a commander could grant a soldier in the field. Complete autonomy. Understood, Colonel, Sharma said. It was the same calm, even tone she had used all along. Victory did not change her. The respect from the others was not spoken. It was in the way they parted for her as she walked back from the firing line, a silent corridor opening in the crowd. It was in the way soldiers who had snickered at her that morning now avoided her gaze, not out of malice, but out of a profound sense of intimidation and awe. They had not just seen a good shooter. They had seen a master, a quiet predator who had been living among them unnoticed. That evening, as the desert sun bled across the horizon, casting long shadows from the HESCO barriers, Sharma was where she was always most comfortable, alone at a weapons cleaning bench. The harsh halogen lights of the maintenance bay cast a sterile glow on the disassembled parts of her rifle. She didn't use power tools or fancy solvents. Just a worn-out toothbrush, a set of dental picks, soft cotton cloths, and a small bottle of CLP. She cleaned every component with a devotion that was almost spiritual. The bolt carrier group, wiped clean of carbon until the steel shone with a dull luster. The firing pin, checked for microscopic fractures. The bore, scrubbed and patched until it gleamed like a mirror. It was a ritual, a way of resetting the world to a state of clean, mechanical order. The sound of boots on concrete made her look up. It was Jensen. His face was blotchy, his eyes red-rimmed. His swagger was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out shame. Rostova had not been gentle. His career was over. A court-martial was the best he could hope for. He stopped about 10 feet away, not daring to approach the bench. He just stood there for a long moment watching her hands work. He saw the intricate, practiced movements, the sheer competence that he had so arrogantly underestimated. He had tried to break her, but all he had done was reveal a strength he couldn't comprehend. He held up a brand new, still-in-the-wrapper magazine. From the armory, he said, his voice a hoarse croak. The master gunny said, he said to give this to you. He placed it on the edge of a nearby crate, a humble offering, and backed away. He didn't apologize. Words were useless now. The gulf between them was too vast. He turned and walked away into the gathering darkness. Sharma watched him go. She didn't retrieve the magazine right away. Her focus returned to her work. She finished cleaning the last component and began the reassembly. Each piece slid into place with a familiar, satisfying click. The trigger group seating, the bolt carrier sliding home, the upper and lower receivers locking together. It was the sound of order being restored, of a dangerous tool being made ready. She worked the charging handle, the action smooth as glass. She did a final function check, the hammer falling with a dull thud on an empty chamber. She placed the rifle in its case, the foam interior a perfect cradle. She finally stood and walked over to the crate, picking up the new magazine Jensen had left. She unwrapped it, the plastic crinkling in the quiet bay. She inspected it, her thumb testing the spring's tension. It was perfect. She placed it with her other gear, a silent acceptance of the gesture. She stepped out of the bay into the cool night air. The desert sky was a spectacle of stars, a cold, indifferent beauty that dwarfed the small human dramas below. She looked out towards the dark, jagged line of the mountains on the horizon. Out there, in that darkness, was Operation Serpent's Eye. Out there was the next problem to be solved. She felt no elation, no sense of victory. She simply felt ready. The sun would rise in a few hours. The rifle was clean, and Kestrel was on the hunt again.